they have now essentially linked Tylenol use during pregnancy to autism and other neurodevelopmental disorders.
Welcome to The Discerning Mother, the podcast for Jesus-loving moms who want to tune out the noise and tune into God's design for motherhood. I'm Brigid, a board-certified women's health coach, holistic health practitioner, birth nerd, and homeschooling mom of 5. I help moms to heal their minds and bodies, trust their instincts, and embrace the beauty of the way God created them. Here we talk about birth, hormones, motherhood, faith, and anything else. Let's go.
Alrighty, so if you missed it, yesterday there was an announcement from President Trump, RFK Jr., and they said that they have now essentially linked Tylenol use during pregnancy to autism and other neurodevelopmental disorders, which is pretty huge if you think about it, because again, the rates of autism have skyrocketed recently. I believe it was like in the 50s or something. It was like 1 in 10,000 children. And now it's like 1 in 13 for boys and 1 in 20 for girls. And again, it varies a little bit based on like state and things like that. But it still is just incredibly, it has skyrocketed. And so we really need to figure out what is at the root of why it has really significantly increased. And I'm not at all saying that like Tylenol is the one. And our bodies and our genes are so complex, especially during development, that I think it's pretty naive and impossible for us to like pinpoint and say this is exactly why these rates are skyrocketing. But I do think it's important to recognize that this is likely one aspect and one very important thing that we can do to change to help reduce these incidences of neurodevelopmental disorders. There's a lot of information coming out in the media, especially even if you look at the headlines where it's like they are saying these unproven studies, and just the language that is being used I think is really divisive and also really an insult to mothers and fathers, because it's making them seem as if like they're not actually intelligent enough to do their own research. So the media just needs to give them the research like a silver basket. And I don't think that that's, first off, appropriate or necessary. That is not the job of the media. The job of the media is just to report what is happening, and then it's from there the responsibility of the mother and the father to go research and make their own decisions. Okay. And so again, this is not about politics. I'm going to get into the science of things. And even if you're not pregnant, like I think that this is really important because again, it opens up this broader discussion that we can continue to talk about in subsequent weeks. So I'm coming at this from a very biological background and also from a psychology and research point of view as well. So again, when I was in college, I did a lot of research and even post-grad did as well. And so I created things in labs and had to do statistically significant calculations and all those things like that. So reading this study or reading this meta-analysis was kind of like the flashback to what I used to do with that. And so again, I'm coming at it from that perspective, not trying to say that this is advice or anything like that. But I think whenever you actually start to look at it, you'll see that this makes a lot of sense. Why it's going to be something for you to consider potentially to not use Tylenol anymore in the future, really for anything. Okay. All right. Okay. So this study that they're referencing, Trump and RFK Jr. referencing, was published in 2025. And so it was like August. So very recently. And essentially what this study did is it searched literature up through February 2025. And it observed, and it included human or like observational human studies as well, that looked at acetaminophen exposure during pregnancy and then later neurodevelopmental outcomes. If you're not familiar with what acetaminophen is, it's simply just Tylenol. Tylenol is the brand name, but acetaminophen is actually a very simple compound to make. I actually made it whenever I was in organic chemistry. It was like super simple. And it essentially, all you do is you take raw components, you distill them, and then you have created acetaminophen or Tylenol. Okay. It's actually a very simple procedure. Okay. A couple of big things about the study. So the review included 46 studies in total. So again, I keep saying study. I'm sorry. It's not exactly accurate. So essentially it was a review. A review looks at other people's studies and does some meta-analysis to see if there's any significance or things like that. The studies themselves are the ones who looked at the actual people and like taking in the data. So again, the review that just was released looked at studies, just to make that clarification. Of those 46 studies that they looked at, 27 reported positive associations. That means that they reported a statistically significant link between having a prenatal acetaminophen use and some sort of neurodevelopmental outcome. From my research and reading it, again, it was released in August, but I only read it last night, so hopefully I didn't miss anything. But 9 of those found no significant association, but 4 of those found negative or positive associations. Like, that's pretty significant. And so, again, it's not like 100% sure, because I think this is a multifactorial consideration that we need to keep in mind. Again, that's a pretty significant number, and I'll get into the numbers here in a second. So when people ask, like, how large is the risk? Again, it's impossible to say because, again, there's so many different factors at play. Like, it depends on the frequency of use. It depends on food that the mother is eating. It depends on if the mother has an MTHFR mutation. Like, there's so many different things at play. But again, this is just one simple thing that mothers can do to help at least eliminate the potential, at least a small potential, of their child developing a neurodevelopmental disorder. Okay. And so what's important, though, is that a lot of these studies that they looked at that were positive associations had pretty significant p-values. And a p-value is going to be it's going to give you the statistical significance of the study itself. So what that means is that the statistical significance is essentially looking at how significant is the data. That means, did they have enough of a sample size? Did they have, of those sample sizes, did they have enough people who actually had whatever they were specifically looking for? And a few other variations as well, depending on the study. And so you really want to have a p-value or a confidence interval is another way to think about it. You want to have that as ideally around 95%, which would be a p of 0.05. But science considers a p of 1 or less, or a confidence interval of 90 or more, to be statistically significant. And so that's where a lot of these studies had those p-values right around 1, which again is showing that they're going to be statistically significant. Now it's, again, multifactorial. So in some of them, they did sibling controlled analyses or other designs to try to control some of that, like, shared familial confounding. And those times, some of them did produce weaker or basically null estimates, right? And so again, that's where it's showing that there might be there's going to be some other things going on in this as well. And so that's where it's so important to look at the whole person, not just like Tylenol is producing autism, right? Okay. The other important thing to note is that we still need more research. We always need more research. It's never a good idea just to, like, take one grain of research and just run with it. It's always so important to continue to try to learn more, right? And so with that in mind, again, correlation does not equal causation. This is one of the biggest things that is driven home whenever you are researching, right? So just because there's some correlation, that doesn't mean that it's the actual cause of things. Again, we are such complex creatures. If you took a genetics class or you learned even think about like a Punnett square from like basic biology. There's so many different factors that go into that. And it's a matter of, like, again, the genes are there. And it's a matter of the environment is the one that's really, like, turning the gene on and off. So again, if you have genes that might be associated with a higher risk of neurodevelopmental disorders, but your mom in utero is only eating, like, clean foods, has no endocrine disruptors around her, like all these different things, the likelihood of that gene being turned on might be significantly lower than if the mother was taking, in this instance, Tylenol or other things like that, right? And so again, it's really important to remember that, again, we are people, we are complex, and it's not so easy to just say, like, this is the thing that's causing it. Again, am I for Tylenol usage? Not really, no. And I'm going to get to that here in a second. And so the other thing that I wanted to mention is the heterogeneity across studies. And so because this was a review of different studies, there's different cohorts, countries, definitions, things like that. And so therefore, the authors of this review had to interpret those the best that they can. So again, it's not a perfect review, but it does give really great information and insight. Okay, so where do you go from here? Well, first off, like, don't panic if you've ever taken Tylenol. Don't panic, right? Okay, the biggest thing to remember is that whenever your body is producing a fever or has any pain or anything like that, remember, those are symptoms. Those are telling you that something is going on inside of your body that actually needs the support. And by taking Tylenol or medication, that's really just sort of masking the symptoms. It's not really necessarily getting to the root cause of what's going on. And so, for example, in the case of a fever, which is what a lot of people use Tylenol for, they take the Tylenol and yes, it reduces the fever. But what it also does is it depletes glutathione in the cells. Glutathione is necessary for the anti-inflammatory response to happen. And if it's kind of ironic because if you are taking if you're taking Tylenol to reduce the inflammation response, but you're also taking Tylenol and it depletes the natural glutathione, then that's also going to reduce the anti-inflammatory processes that are naturally occurring in the body. So it's this cycle, this negative cycle that just like keeps repeating itself. So that's something that's really important is, again, what is the root cause? So again, if there's a fever, obviously if it's like dangerously high, then yes, we need to do something about it. But if it's a slight fever and you or the child is still acting pretty normally, might just feel a little bit under the weather, then maybe it's better to support with other things like rest, different foods, clothing changes, homeopathy, things like that instead. And so just, again, really trying to think about supporting the system in a way that is more natural to the immune system versus just supplements, like taking something to reduce the symptoms, right? Same thing with pain. If you're feeling pain, why are you feeling pain? Did you overdo it someday? Did you need to rest more? Do you need to, whatever it is, like that. So think about it like that instead of the concrete Tylenol gets rid of this or that. The other thing too is to remember, like, food. Food is so, so important. Stress. What are your stress levels looking like? What does your movement day to day look like? If we do not have good, like, moderated stress levels, if our intake of food is really processed and like our metabolic health is a disaster, then our bodies are going to be more predisposed to needing these artificial materials in order to help whenever we have something that is quote unquote going wrong, right? And so again, food, sleep, rest, nutrition, all of the just like the basic things are going to be so important. Even if you're not pregnant, like, they're so important no matter what, right? The other thing is, it's like, yes, if you need to take acetaminophen because maybe you have something and you're like, it's not going away, I really need this extra support, like, just to get me over the hump, then like maybe take the most minimal dose that you can. And like, just know that it's okay if it's like every once in a while. Again, like, I'm not the person that's going to say like never ever, because I have taken it whenever I had a really nasty case of mastitis and I just really needed, like, it's been 3 days of having a fever and I needed my fever to break. Right? And so again, literally take as minimal as you can and then document it, see how it made you feel, everything like that. And then again, God made such great alternatives to this with homeopathy, with plants, with teas, with all these different things. So really explore some of those. And again, time is really the best thing. Give your body time, your immune system time to really process these things. Okay? And so let's see. The review also notes, and this is in every single study, so I mean, like, take it with a grain of salt, but the review also notes that more rigorous studies are needed. For example, like biomarker-based exposure measurement, randomized designs, sibling comparison, trials addressing biological mechanisms, everything like that. And that's simply to say, what I have been saying is that this is such a multifactorial issue that I think it's pretty naive of us to just put it in the box of like, Tylenol causes autism. I think it's one part that Tylenol has a role in potentially making autism more likely in children during neurodevelopment, right? Okay, I think that's probably a better, safer way to go about this. And so right now, if you are pregnant and you're hoping to become pregnant, like, don't worry. Like, don't make medication decisions from headlines. Again, am I for taking Tylenol? Not really. I think there's better alternatives. I think that there are things that we can do from a holistic standpoint that are actually going to be better. But like, if you have a trusted OB, talk to them. Talk to your midwife. Like, pray about it. Like, talk to God, the ultimate healer. Like, do things like that. Don't just take random medical advice from the internet and from me, right? Think to yourself, like, why do I need this medication? What are the alternatives? What dose and duration do I want? Go about it like that. Become a little researcher. Really ask questions, get into it. Again, Don't just blindly trust anybody. Do your own research, trust your instincts, because again, you know better than anyone else what your body needs. So right now, again, don't freak out if you've ever needed to take acetaminophen during pregnancy. Again, you're doing your best and just keep going with it. And so thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions, please help. I hope that this episode helped you. If it did, share it with a friend who's pregnant or planning to be pregnant or just loves health and wellness. And I'll keep tracking new evidence and we'll bring you any updates as they come in. And until then, make sure you take care of yourself. They have now essentially linked Tylenol use during pregnancy to autism and other neurodevelopmental disorders.